This is Vocatio, where we record conversations about Christian calling for college students. Christmas is not far away, which is really exciting. And we thought it would be good to have a conversation. We've been having these conversations anyway. That it'd be good to record a conversation. We might title this something like Home for the Holidays, because we want to help students think wisely about how to make the most of this time and how to handle temptations that are inevitably coming around the holidays. Christmas is just a couple weeks away, and there's so much that we love about Christmas, right? We love all the traditions, the decor, we love family, love being together. There's great food, there's Christmas movies, there's all the stuff, right? But everybody can see it coming. There's going to be temptations and challenges that arise related to Christmas. So thought it would be good for us to talk about that. I wondered what if we organize our conversation maybe under like four headings, right? I think there's probably four things we need to think about. Students could think about coming home, about being together, about getting rest, and about going back. And not everything that we would want to say on these four things is going to apply equally to every student, but I would hope that students will, even if they already live at home and they're not coming home, they get the idea of
Yeah.
being off and being on break. So let's start there. Let's start with coming home. All right. So coming home is a real gift. Many students they're away at school. Maybe they're in a dorm or they're in an apartment, and they're going to come home, and they might be home for a few days. They might be home for a month.
Mm.
Or students, even if they are already at home, they're living at home. Now, all of a sudden, class is over.
Right.
They don't have the study session down at the coffee shop. They're home.
Right.
And let's talk about that. So, you're a mom, so you get a very close perspective on this. What are some of the temptations and challenges that students are going to face in coming home?
Yeah. Well, I think that often students forget that they've been living kind of a different life for many months out of the year. And when they come home or are home more, they can find that all these temptations that they had forgotten about, that
Mhm.
maybe had not been present when they're out at school, working with friends. They have different temptations in those contexts, but then when they come home, it's like all those old temptations that were there when they were in middle school, high school, all of a sudden start to resurface. Tensions with a particular sibling, or temptations to be lazy or grumpy. Who knows what it is, but you can all of a sudden feel like, I don't know, sometimes you might wonder, have I grown at all? Have I matured at all? Because I seem to be reverting back to old habits that I had, that I thought I had moved on from. So it's really good to be aware of that, not only so that we don't get too discouraged, but also so that we can prepare.
Mhm.
I think that's really key. We have to just have our eyes wide open and realize we are going into the Christmas season is a different set of joys and opportunities, but it's also a different set of temptations, and we need to be ready for this.
Yeah, I think that's a really wise perspective. One of the things I remember your dad saying, I've heard him say years ago, is he would talk about his daily routine, not special for the holidays.
Right.
Driving home from
Yeah.
work every day, as he entered the neighborhood, he would just pull over
Right.
for a minute or two, and he would just make a transition in his mind and in his soul. He said, "Okay, work is behind now, and now I'm coming home, and everything that entails,
Right.
coming home as a servant." Coming home to to be present with my family, to give my time and attention to them, and that intentional transition. He just
Yeah.
described the effect that would have as he went into the evening, and I think if that works on a daily basis on a commute home, how helpful could that be for students? This would be a great time. Maybe on the plane, maybe on
Right.
the drive home, maybe just you finish your last final, go have a nap, and then sit down with your journal and take 10 minutes and just pray and ask,
Right.
what are some ways that I can anticipate being tempted? These things are rarely surprises. Like
Right.
you know what's coming. So how much better to write them down, pray about those things, and think, what's a verse that speaks to this? So yeah, in all of that, I think I think that preparation is so important, and so much of the emotion of that temptation could be lessened, or students just won't be as shocked when it happens if they prepare. So, what about the practicalities of it? And are there specific things that students can be doing as they come home? How should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. Stopping on the way, finding a time when finals are over. So even if you need to pause this and listen to it after finals are over, give your attention right now to what God has called you to do today. Don't be in two places at once. I think it was Jim Elliot who said, wherever you are, be all there. Live to the hilt of every situation you believe to be the will of God. So if it's the will of God for you to take a final today, focus on that final. But then on the way home, find a time right before you go home, on the way home, where you can prepare your heart. I think it really helps to have one verse that just anchors you, that you can think of in these moments. And so I think Ecclesiastes, again, offers us a lot of wisdom here.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, I think it's 7:14. I'm bad at
That's
references.
Right. Yeah.
But it says, in the day of prosperity, be joyful.
Yep.
And in the day of adversity, consider that God has made one as well as the other. So I think it's a really interesting verse that can just help us. Our days are going to really fall into one of those two categories. So it helps us to know how to live every day. So be really joyful for all the prosperity that you have. Every one of us is going home to prosperity. Many of you are going home to Christian families, parents who have raised you in the fear of the Lord. And they are the ones who have possibly funded your college education. Maybe they are, maybe even if they don't provide the funds, if you're working, they are the ones who prepared you, who taught you God's word, who taught you, gave you a great education. So be joyful, and that includes being grateful to your parents. Be prepared to be grateful, to be joyful for all that they've given you. Don't complain. That's one of the worst ways to bring a grumpy attitude into Christmas, is not going to bless anybody. So be joyful.
Yeah.
Be grateful for all that God has given you. And actually, you'll find that you're a lot happier. But what would you say to students who face challenges at home? Maybe their family is not a Christian. Maybe they have a sibling who isn't following the Lord. That's a grief to everyone in the family.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. And one of the things I love about Ecclesiastes 7:14, I'm so glad you brought this up. It's such a great verse. One of the things I love about it is that Solomon just assumes that his readers are smart and that they can figure out what he says. He says something in Hebrew. It's Hebrew poetry, so it doesn't rhyme sounds. It rhymes ideas. And he starts out by saying, in the day of prosperity, rejoice. And in the day of adversity, remember that God made one as well as the other. God made this day and God made that day. If God made this day, the day of adversity, prosperity, he made this day, and you're supposed to rejoice. If he also made that day, the day of adversity, then you're supposed to do on that day what you do on this day, which is rejoice.
Yeah, right.
And he assumes that you're going to read that and, if A equals B, B equals C, A equals C, right? So we're supposed to rejoice in both days alike because God made them both alike. And you would think it would be easier to rejoice when it's just prosperity, but we know that even that the gift of prosperity can tempt us to complacency and to complaining.
Yeah.
But how much more difficult on the day of adversity? If going home to family is a difficult experience, many students can grow embittered by that. They're just gritting their teeth trying to get through it. And I can't help but wonder if James had Ecclesiastes 7:14 in mind when he wrote, "Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter trials of various kinds." And so that idea of rejoicing and saying, even this trial, even this difficulty, if that's what it is from the hand of the Lord. And it is a gift designed to shape us to be more like Jesus Christ. That's hard to remember But that's where the preparation is so important. If you
Right,
come in
right,
armed with that, it's going to
right,
transform the
right,
effect of that adversity during the holidays. And
right,
so
right,
I feel like for many students, that 10 to 15 minutes, and we say like get started there, for many students, that'll easily stretch into a longer period of time as they
right,
settle into just praying and asking God for help with what they
right,
anticipate either as the test of prosperity or the test of adversity.
right,
So,
right.
yeah. Now, anything to add to that?
No, that's good.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think then, I think that's a good segue because that brings us to this idea of being together. What happens at the holidays is we're thrown together,
Yeah.
and um, for better or for worse, it means we're going to be with people more,
Right.
with our families, with Christmas parties. You're going to be seeing people. If you've been away at college and you're coming back, you're going to maybe be running into friends from your old youth group, from your old high school, from your old sports team, whatever. And there's going to be a batch of temptations that could arise there, and a batch of opportunities that could arise
Right.
there. And I think it's important to see both.
Right.
So let's think about that for a minute. What is waiting back home for these students in terms of being together?
Yeah. I think one of the temptations that college students can face is that while they have to work really hard when they're in school and when they're going to work, it really is kind of all about them in a lot of ways. They have a lot of responsibility. They feel the weight of that. And while we should be reaching out and serving to everyone all the time, it's a lot of times your duty, your calling from God on many of these days as a student is to be studying. It might be by yourself, might be with others, but it's to be learning. But then when we come home for the holidays, it's a time where we're doing a lot of relating to other people. And it can be very easy to kind of still bring that kind of inward mentality that is just focused inward into that time. And we need to refocus our attention outward and give ourselves away to others.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not easy, but when we prepare,
Mm-hmm.
when we come in with that mindset, we actually find that's what gives us the most joy.
Yeah.
Because it's selfishness that weighs us down.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's giving our lives away that's really going to make us happy. And I think as we talk about calling, you're both preparing for your calling right now, but you're also figuring out and asking the Lord, what is my calling today?
Mm-hmm.
And there's many people that God is calling you to be a blessing to today. It might be an elderly relative. It might be a younger sibling. It might be your mom or your dad.
Right.
It might be an uncle, an aunt. There's all kinds of people, friends that are back at home that need your encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of people. So going in, asking yourself, how can I give my life away today? How can I give myself to others like Jesus did?
Yeah, I think a verse that comes to mind for me here is Mark 10:45. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life away as a ransom for many. None of us are going to give our lives as a ransom. That's only Jesus can do that.
Right.
But if we're going to be followers of Jesus, if we're going to be like Jesus, that's going to include doing some of what Jesus does, coming not to be served, but to serve. And I think, especially for young people, it's it's easy to come home and think, returns the conquering hero.
Right.
I am
maybe young men.
Okay, that's how, okay. Maybe that's how the young men think. But it's easy to think, well, I just want to sort of slide back into habits or patterns of comfort, of ease, of self-orientation. I want to sleep in. I'm just going to maybe leave my room a mess, never really unpack the suitcase. We've seen all sorts of things. And I think if young people can come into that holiday leaning forward to think, yeah, exactly what you said. How can I lay my life down? How can I come postured every day, every morning, every event? How can I come ready to serve? If I got that radar switched on, not to be served, not trying to suck resources and opportunities towards myself, but to serve, to give my life away, again, transforms the Christmas experience.
Yeah.
I think it'll be wonderful.
Is this a good time for me to read my?
Okay.
I've got this great quote from J.I. Packer. I read this chapter every year in Knowing God. It's called God Incarnate.
You mean you read it every year at Christmas?
Every
right?
year at Christmas.
Yeah.
I read this chapter called God Incarnate. So I meditate on the incarnation every year. And at the conclusion of this, I probably first read this when I was a college student. And this was a very convicting and encouraging portion. He says this. He says, the Christmas spirit does not shine out in the Christian snob. For the Christmas spirit is the spirit of those who, like their master, live their whole lives on the principle of making themselves poor, spending and being spent
Good.
to enrich their fellow humans,
Yes.
giving time, trouble, care, and concern to do good to others, and not just their own friends, in whatever way there seems need. There are not as many of us, he says, who show this spirit as there should be.
Yeah.
If God in mercy revives us, one of the things he will do will be to work more of this spirit in our hearts and lives. If we desire spiritual quickening for ourselves individually, one step we should take is to seek to cultivate this spirit. And then he quotes 2 Corinthians, you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. And I love how he talks about revival here.
Yes.
I know many Christian young people who long to serve the Lord in their generation, who want to see revival in the church, who see that there are so many problems in the world and even in the church at large. And they want to be a part of that, what God wants to do. And this starts right now when you go home and how you relate to your family. It starts by giving yourself away, by asking God to revive your heart first, to give you the Spirit of Christ. As you live that out, just what a contrast that is to the world at large out there. What an example of what Christ has come to do for us.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you're thinking that, because that's a message not just for young people. I need to hear that quote, and I need to hear that idea. So I think that's really great, and I love that. And I think that thought that the Lord can and will work revival through these students, that he will sow spiritual growth and health through their efforts, is really, really important, really profound. Okay, so that I think brings us then to another category, because that sounds like effort, and you know, we're leaning forward. That's work. Holidays are also for rest.
Yeah.
And so I think third category we want to talk about is getting rest, right? So coming home, being together, getting rest. I think that many college students and many people older than college students as well come to the holidays with certain expectations of this. This is a time for me now to get rest, end of semester, you know, maybe older people taking off of work or whatever. And then what happens is this sort of mysterious thing happens where we get to the end of the holidays and we're ready to return to school or work or whatever it is. And we've got more regret than rest, more regret about how we spent the time and how we didn't really rest, because we feel like, you know, what did I do really? I squandered it. I flittered it away. And we look back and we think, well, here's the problem, I think, is I think a lot of people maybe don't really understand what rest is. When it says in Genesis 1, at the very beginning of chapter 2, that God created everything in 6 days, and then he finished his work, and on the seventh day he rested. God didn't fling himself on his couch, right? God, metaphorically speaking, God, there was a cessation of labor that was good and right, but we're not told much. Like what, you know, God, he doesn't have a physical body that gets weary, so he doesn't need to stop and take a nap. We need rest for our bodies, but also for our minds and our souls. And so I think a lot of young people, I think a lot of people of any age, if they've never really thought carefully about the category of rest, they just assume that, well, if I just veg on the couch and I kind of scroll something while a game is on or while that Christmas movie is on, okay, that's getting rest. or if I'm just hanging out with our friends, we're just shooting the breeze and talking and kind of sharing memories, but not, like, oh, well, that's rest. And that's not necessarily the case. So we've both thought a lot about this. We've talked a lot about this before, and I think this is a topic we'll probably return to in some future videos in a more detailed way. But specifically the holidays, how do you think young people can best be thinking about rest and seeking to practice rest during the break?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, remembering that Christ is our rest.
Good. Yeah.
And if we're trying or expecting that other things are going to give us that kind of rest that only Christ can give us, we are going to be restless.
Oh, yeah.
Our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee, Augustine. So
Good.
I think that making sure that your heart is there is no disappointed expectation when you make Christ your rest. He is not going to, you're not going to come home with regret. I think some of that can be even just 5-10 minutes each morning. Even if you're sleeping in, and as soon as you wake up, you need to be with family and you don't have 2 hours quiet time in the morning, that make sure you get a couple of minutes to seek the Lord, read his word, pray, find your rest in him. Schedule times to take extended time, a couple of hours. Grab a sibling, grab a friend, and go read your Bibles, read something good. So finding your rest in Christ. I think also this is not insightful advice, but I think everyone has discovered that devices aren't actually restful.
Right.
They actually increase our anxiety.
Right.
They can using them and just the distraction that they can be. So you might want to try, taking time away from your phone over Christmas. Take a day and just don't look at it and see how you feel. Yep. We had a student at the school I run who we have a no electronics policy here at our school, and this was new to her, and so she didn't bring her phone, and at first it kind of made her feel strange to not have it with her. But as the year went on, she said she actually really enjoyed the days each week that she had to leave her phone at home.
Yes.
She found that actually made her more restful and more focused. So again, that's not anything new, but we probably will find that we'll be a lot more rested if we do that. That's just one thing we all can do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I love that you started with Christ is our rest, because I think of a verse there like Matthew 11:28-30, when Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden." Sounds like a lot of college students I know. Yeah. "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I think it's really great. We talk a lot about the heart of Jesus. We hear a lot about the heart of Jesus for people in that, which is great. I think what's often overlooked in that verse is that Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you." And Jesus says, "Come obey." Right. He's not like, just take some kind of, like, there is this, it's not some sort of blank check to just go do what you want and enjoy the heart of Jesus for you. The heart of Jesus is very important. Yeah. And the heart of Jesus comes to us as Jesus says, "Take my yoke upon you." And I think I think part of that, what that means is to think, okay, I've been given this time. I've been given, for some students, it's a week or two. It could be a month or more of break between semesters. And how can you take the yoke of Jesus upon you? Now, yes, his yoke is easy and his burden is light. And for the Christian, there's nothing more delightful than to obey. And even though that sometimes seems hard, Christians will find that obedience feels, it is an easy yoke and a light burden. They will find that. And so I think students can think about this like on a broad and on a narrow way, in a broad and a narrow way. In a broad way is saying, okay, at the end of this month or week or break, whatever it is, however long it is, what do I want to have done? And what do I want this time to have been like in my attitude, in my actions, in my daily habits, in my interactions with others? I also think it can be really helpful to think of this on a very narrow level about individual activities. And if we're setting aside time with family or friends and thinking, ooh, I want to do this thing that would be, I crave this thing that I think would be so restful,
Right.
to think, what is that going to feel like on the other side of that? After you binge watch football on a day or binge watch some show with your sibling or something, and it's 3 in the afternoon and you've never changed out of your pajamas, you've just eaten junk food and you've been on the
Right.
couch all day. Do you really feel rested?
Oh,
Is that like, no, you won't. You will not feel, and if students can't anticipate that, I'll just tell you, you will not feel rested from that. And so now there's a time and a place for enjoying a movie with a family or friends, right? We're not against that. But what we're saying is to be intentional about that time and to look out at the end of the matter, to look ahead to the end of the matter.
yeah.
Solomon is he's always bringing this up in Ecclesiastes and in
Yeah.
Proverbs. Here's the end of the matter. Here's where this
Right.
thing heads. And to think, what could I do if I've got a free half an afternoon? What could I do at this time? Where on the end of that, on the other side of that, I will come refreshed, invigorated. I will experience joy. I will be ready now with more capacity
Yeah.
to go in and serve others.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that might mean something very different than just flopping
Right.
on the couch to scroll my phone.
Right.
That might mean going serving in any number of ways, practicing an instrument, reading a book, going over to visit an elderly neighbor, maybe cooking something for your family. Who knows? There's any number of ways that you might actually find rest.
Yeah.
So speak to that. You have a lot of
Yeah.
thoughts on this too, I know.
Well, no, you were reminding me. Elizabeth Elliot says, "Obedience is the gateway to joy."
Good. Yeah, I love that one.
Obedience is the gateway to joy.
Yeah.
And I think we have a whole generation of very unhappy students.
Yeah.
And
It's true in our generation too.
well, that's true too.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think for Christians,
Yeah.
we've largely forgotten this idea.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
We realize the problem. We realize we don't have joy. We know we're unhappy. We admit we're unhappy, but we don't realize what's the gateway to joy. Where do we go for joy? It's in obedience. It's that verse you said. It's taking his yoke upon us. So yes, giving your life away, obeying. Just how can I obey today? It's a really simple question, and it can transform your Christmas. But also that, like you said, something that reminded me. Even thinking it'll make you stronger coming back to school instead of being rested or trying to get rest in just entertainment and sleep. Right. Trying to grow in obedience. I mean, there's a novel idea. Nobody's grow in obedience over Christmas, and you will be stronger going into the new year. So
yeah, for sure.
I think that's great. One other thing I would say is kind of off topic, but I do think that being back at home, whether you live at home and just have more time at home over the holidays, or you're actually coming home, this is a great time to learn more from your parents, especially if they are Christians. But I think a lot of times we think that learning just happens in the classroom.
Good.
But I was talking to a young woman recently, a college student, who was telling me how her and her other friends, they really want to learn how to be wives and mothers someday too. They're not getting that at their school.
No.
But they want to learn that. So they were trying to study how to do that. This is a great opportunity.
Yes.
In our practical theology class here at Trinity a couple weeks ago, I had the girls speed plan Thanksgiving dinner, right? To just practice and see, what is this like, right? What is it like to have to plan dinner? But find out from your mom, if you're a young woman, learn how to make some of the dishes the family has passed down. Learn what it means to organize, and you can help her out in the process. Young men, learn from your dad. Ask for coffee. Say, what can I learn from you? How can I encourage you? I know you learned a lot from your dad at this time in your life when you were in college.
Yeah, that's really true. For me, during college, my time with my dad was this huge catalyst. It was this accelerant for my growth. Yeah. And a lot of that was just, it wasn't complicated. Right. It was more like, Dad, hey, this thing happened this semester, or I had this challenge with managing work and school. How do you think I should do this better? What do you see in me?
He's been doing this for decades.
Yeah,
now.
And he knows me better than
than
I knew myself at that time. And so that was so helpful. So I think that's really wise. I think that's a great way to make the most of the time. Great. So this is good. We're working our way through our topics here. We talked about coming back,
Yeah.
about being together, about getting rest. Now, I want to talk about going back,
Yep.
and maybe students are like, oh, it's too early to talk about that.
Right,
And
right.
and I think that's okay. Actually, we're not going to say much about that here because
Right.
time is short, and we actually will. We're gonna have another conversation about this.
Yes.
Maybe right after Christmas, we'll record it just to help students prepare for that transition back.
Yes.
But I would like to give a little bit of a teaser on this because for this conversation, and just
Oh,
here's
It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
well, because that day is coming, and I think that many students, it's just this sort of dread that's out there, and it's like the break is going by so fast,
Yeah.
and part of the dread they feel is they're just not prepared,
Yeah.
and the semester is going to own them rather than them owning the semester. And there's an opportunity here in that preparation. Preparation, we believe, is just so important for everything we do. If you prepare well, there's a way to come into this rather than being just full of dread for the semester, full of delight and excitement about, okay, I get to go
Right.
back. I'm ready to attack this thing.
Right.
So, little teaser on that conversation. What are we going to be talking about?
Yeah, I think we're going to talk through what we do with a state of the student
Mhm.
conversation at the beginning of the year, how to get into the new year with clear plans and goals for what God has called you to do. So
Yeah.
I think that Christmas, right after Christmas, right before Christmas, right after Christmas is a great time to do this, to really take a day. So I encourage you, one thing you could do right now is just find one day
Mhm.
that you can set aside to read your Bible, pray, get some advice from some godly mentors in your life, to ask the Lord, what is He calling you to this year, this next semester? What is He working in your life
Yep.
internally in terms of what areas is He calling you to grow in holiness, and also what are ways He might be calling you to serve, to step out, to take risks, to honor and glorify Him. So it's a fun thing to think about at Christmas, and a lot of times if we neglect to think about it, you're right, then we just go back kind of. It's very bleak.
Yeah.
It's always raining on the day that you go home. So I think we want to talk about how to prepare to really jump into the new year.
Yeah, I think I look forward to that conversation. I think we have a lot of good practicalities in that, but I would want to give students now, even now as they're trying not to think about
Right.
trying to be in the moment and trying to think about Christmas. I would want them to be prepared. Like, no, there's a way of doing this differently,
Right.
and there's a way
Right.
to
Right.
do this that can be full of faith, that can be excited for what does the Lord have for you this semester.
Yeah.
The Lord has designed this
Yeah.
semester, and providentially, in His wise and sovereign control of the universe, He is bringing classes, professors, roommates, classmates into your life to get something done,
Yeah.
to accomplish His will, and to grow you for His glory and to be like Christ. And so we just need to prepare and be ready to seize those opportunities. So
Yep.
we'll have
Yep.
that conversation. That'll
Yep.
be coming soon, probably right after Christmas. We'll put that video out. So that'll be fun. So good. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. I think there's probably a lot more we could talk about, and we would love it if students have questions
Yep.
along these topics. Send them to us. You can put them in the comments of the video right down below, or you can email them to us, reach out to us on the Trinity College website, whatever. So
Yep.
this has been Vocatio. These are conversations about Christian calling for college students, and all of this content is provided by Trinity College of Louisville. And at Trinity College, we train young men and young women for Christ and for the church. Students can learn more at trinitycollegelou.com. So,
And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.